Hi everybody, it is I, Richard Weil, with kind of a little more serious video here today. I'm going to explain why I'm doing this video here in a minute. It could be kind of a long video, but and I'll explain the impetus as well. This is a video specifically for smart boys. Now, saying that sounds like it's derogatory. Let me explain what I mean by this. First of all, I'm using the term boys because I'm talking about boys who are middle school, high school, kind of in that range. Still boys, honestly. And I'm talking about boys who are intelligent, who are noticeably intelligent, who are smart, or at least appear to be so. I'm going to be honest with you. I have never felt like I was all that smart. But my whole life, people have treated me as if I am. A lot of people, well, yeah, a lot of people think I'm just really bright. And if people think you're intelligent, I think they tend to treat you differently, which is why I'm making this video. I'm not going to tell you what your life is going to be like. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to tell you my experience. Maybe it'll sound familiar, maybe it won't. Hopefully, maybe it'll be a waste of time, maybe it'll give you something, it'll help out. I don't know. I honestly don't. I also want to make sure that I clarify this right now. There are smart girls. There are really intelligent girls out there. I know. I've known a lot of them. But my perspective, my personal experience, is from the perspective of a boy. So maybe intelligent girls will get something out of this as well, but I'm sure that their experience will be different than mine. In fact, if you're an intelligent boy, there's a good chance your experiences will be different than mine as well. Let's face it, I am literally I'm a baby boomer. I was born in 1963, which is a boomer generation, and the world has changed. It's changed dramatically. So maybe what I'm going to say doesn't apply to you anyway. But I've kept an eye on things. I think I know how they've changed. So maybe I'll find something that you'll find useful. Maybe not. I'm also talking to parents of smart boys, smart children. The impetus of this, very good, well, I know a lot of parents who are now dealing with very, very smart boys. I have a former student turned friend whose boy is in early high school and taking college courses. She is not letting him attend college full-time, which I think is wise, because there's also sort of a developmental aspect to education, and he needs to be within his own peer group to learn how to interact with people his own age. In my humble opinion, you don't have to agree with me. This whole thing is an opinion piece, so you don't have to agree with anything that I say. And that's your right. We're okay with that. I have another friend who has grandchildren, grandsons, who are just really smart. So maybe if my friends watch this, maybe it'll help them a little bit too. Maybe they'll get some ideas, something they might think about. Now, I don't have any children. So again, my perspective might be theoretical. It may not apply to you and to your situation. I don't know, but I feel like I just need to address this. If you are a smart boy, the world is going to seem different. Be ready for that. I'm not going to say better or worse. Everybody in middle and high school have tough times. And in some ways it's worse today than it's ever been. You start reading about kids who are committing suicide because their colleagues are picking on them online. We didn't have online when I went to high school. But my very best friend was also picked on to the extent that she was pulled out of school because of it. So don't think that you're alone in being the first generation that's ever been picked on. For me personally, I ended up being very isolated through high school. I ended up with very few friends, with almost no social interactions. Not the same. Now, I had my bullies. I was picked on. I was definitely bullied. I was threatened. I had people telling me they were going to kill me after school, and took physical abuse, took emotional abuse. So I had mine too. You're not alone. But it's going to be different for you. And no doors are going to open up for you. You're not going to be handed anything because you're special. Maybe you should. But one of the things, now I have never been athletic. I know nothing about sports. And even if I did, I don't have any sports ability. I've always been kind of a small kid. Never had upper body strength. I've always had really powerful legs. But there's not a lot of sports out there where it's just not fast legs. I'm not fast. When I run, terrible. There's not a lot of sports out there to see how powerful your legs are. I tell you what, if a car ran out of gas, I could push it into the gas station without a problem. They don't have an Olympic sport for that. I've never been interested in sports. I've never understood why I should care if a team manages to get the puck into the hoop in less than 9 innings from 10 yards away. I've never understood that. So I don't. Now, let me add this real quick. I understand the importance of sports and this is going to sound sexist, but especially fathers connecting with their children. I say fathers because I think normally, and that's not always true, it's not always true, but when I grew up it was mainly the men who were into sports. That's the way I was raised, and I suspect it's still the same. And I have my friend's husband has been introducing his daughters to hockey. And I listen to some of those stories, and I get it. It makes sense. It's how they connect. It gives them a common interest. It gives them a topic of conversation. It helps them to form a bond that I never had with my father. My father never inducted me into sports. And maybe that's why I'm not interested in it. Maybe that's why it's always been, kind of something I just don't do. I remember Dad would turn on the television in the family room, lay on the floor with a pillow in front of the television, closer than I was ever allowed to sit, and he'd watch his Sunday football games or baseball games or whatever was on at the time. Never got emotional about it. Very rarely would I hear him call out, "Yes," or, He just watched. And if I watched with him, he would tolerate it as long as I was quiet. He never explained anything. I remember when he would pass the football, when he'd throw footballs and baseballs, because it happened maybe 2 or 3 times in my life. Never really taught me. So I've never been into sports, and I think that might be the reason, because I never had that connection with my father. He never used it in a manner that a lot of parents will use it to forge that connection. My parents, and maybe this is going to sound familiar too, my parents never understood me. Dad would tell me stories from his glory days as a Batavia Bulldog football player. Some years later, Fox would show a television series called Married with Children, and I could picture Al Bundy with his football. I could picture that being my father. I really could. So when I was not interested in sports, and like I say, he never inducted me. So I think he just assumed it would be a natural interest, because I'm a boy. He's a boy, he'll like sports. No, I never did. I never had a reason to like sports. And bless their hearts, they tried. My parents bought me the Encyclopedia Britannica, Young People's Science Encyclopedia, 20 volumes, although 19 plus an index. And I would sit in my room and I would read those, cover to cover, because Dad hated noise. And I'd just read them. Maybe that's where I got my interest in science. I don't know. But without sports, my parents never really knew what to do with me. If you're a smart boy, don't be surprised if you end up being isolated. It's sad to say it should not be like that, but it is. Not just your parents, not just your siblings, but the friends in school. You're not going to have the same friends. I had friends who, they never invited me. It's funny, because I've never been invited. I've never been to a bachelor party. Nobody has ever invited me. I've been in weddings before. I've been in wedding parties, but I've never been invited to a bachelor party. And I think it's because people think I won't like it, which I may not. How would I know? I've never been to one. But it's weird. I was left alone a lot as a child because my parents didn't know what to do with me. I remember going to a baseball game. My dad took me to see the Cincinnati Reds once. Man. When I got my doctorate, I got my PhD, I was in Cincinnati. Well, no, I'm sorry. This was bachelor's degree. Back when I was working on my bachelor's degree in chemistry, I was at the University of Cincinnati. Cincinnati is where my extended family lives. My grandmother, at that point my grandfather had passed on, my aunts, my uncles, everybody was in Cincinnati, and none of them spent time with me. And it got to the point where I would call my grandmother. I'd call her up. And the conversations seemed to get shorter and shorter, to the point where the last time I spoke with her, it was almost, "Oh, hi, thank you for calling. It's so nice to hear from you. I will talk to you again soon." That was all she said to me. Sometimes the conversations were great, but they just kept getting shorter, and I was talking with my mother about that. And my mother's answer to that was, "Well, that's because she feels like you're getting so smart, she has nothing to say to you." Wow. I'm not getting more smart. I'm learning more about a subject that I know she has no interest in. But I'm still me. I'm still, for all intents and purposes, I pretty much sacrificed my family for my education. Nobody in my family, including the extended family, had any college degree higher than my sister's, which was a 2-year associate's degree. And man, I leapfrogged them all. I went all the way to my PhD. If you are perceived as intelligent, people, I hate to say it, it's almost like they're afraid to talk to you. It's almost like they're going to be afraid of looking dumb. They're afraid that they're not going to have anything that you're going to find interesting. So be ready for that. Again, not the way it should be. It's kind of the way I found it. I was just tutoring a few minutes ago. And I was talking with this young girl. And I say young girl because she was in 7th grade. And she asked me a very odd question. Now, this is the first time I'd ever talked with her. First time. I was tutoring her in math, in algebra, basically. She was working on word problems. And she raised the point that her father wants her to learn golf so that she can get a full ride scholarship to college. And she said, I don't know what to do. I tell him that I'm not interested, but he still pushes me to do that. My mother used to push me to go to become a high school teacher. Something I've never been interested in. I kid you not. My mother and I were talking with one of her friends who was saying how impressed she was that I had, at that point, I had my PhD. And my mother literally said, I am not making this up. She literally said, yes, he's a doctor, but he's the wrong kind of doctor. People are going to tell you what they think you should do. When they do that, when you get advice, listen to it. Listen to the advice that you're given. But just because you listen to it doesn't mean you have to take it. Consider it. And some of this advice is going to make you angry. Sometimes someone's going to say something to you. Sometimes they're going to intentionally try to make you angry. I listen. I always listen. And if it's something that makes me angry, I swallow my pride. I try to stay very quiet and I try to hear it now so that I have it. And then later on, when I calm down a little bit, I consider it. Is this advice really appropriate for me or not? So just because I hear it doesn't mean I'm going to accept it. Listen to the advice that you're given. Only accept it if it's the right advice for you. Because it may not be the right advice for you. Maybe you don't want to go into medical fields like my mother wanted me to go into. Maybe you don't want to go out for football like my father thought I was going to. But I listened. I considered it. I considered why. And ultimately I decided yes or no. That, I think, in my humble opinion, will be one of the hardest things for you to do. To maintain your own unique identity, interests, and individuality. Nobody's going to, your parents are not going to try to mislead you to be mean. Nobody is trying to be cruel to tell you what you have to do. They're giving their opinion, what they think is best. But it's up to you to decide, is it best or not? So listen. You can decide whether or not you're going to accept that advice. It's going to be hard, I think, for you to find friends. I have a good friend who is very smart. God, she's smart. She wanted to go into, well, she did. She went into criminal justice. Daughter, actually, of the woman who now has intelligent grandboys. And she was struggling in school. She was having a really hard time. In college, when she was in college. Because she was a serious person. She had a career goal. She knew what she wanted. The problem with college is you learn to balance free time and academic time. And most people, including me, get that balance wrong. My problem is I was too academically inclined. I never went out and did anything. I never socialized. I never went to parties. Now, there are some things that a lot of kids do in college I would not do. I've never done drugs. I've never even smoked pot. I've had aspirin. Because I always felt like the one thing I have going for me in this world is my brain. And I never wanted to mess with that. So I never did drugs. In college, I never drank. Well, good luck not drinking and not doing drugs in college. It makes you an outcast. It makes you weird. And that's okay. Because I know who I am. I don't need drugs. I don't need alcohol to know who I am. But look, there are some things in our society that are common experience. There are some things, some common thread that holds us together as a society. Sports. God, people love sports. They view war as sports now. When we invaded Afghanistan, woohoo! We're invading, it'll be over in a week. Yay! We're so cool, we're the best. Took a little longer than a week, didn't it? I have friends out there who were so pro-war when that war began, and I spoke up against it. Because I remember, a decade earlier, before we did, Russia finally pulled out. Russia tried the same thing that we did. They invaded Afghanistan. Sure, it would be over in a week. And 10 years later, they finally pulled the last of their troops out. And a decade after that, here we are doing the same thing. And I told my friends, this is not going to be over in a week. This is not going to be over in a month. And they said to me, well, what are you going to do when you find out they're wrong? They're going to accept us as liberators, and we're going to beat them in 2 weeks, max. I said, I will be the first one to admit that I'm wrong and apologize. 20 years after that war started, we withdrew. 20 years. I'm still waiting for my friends to apologize, to admit they were wrong. I'm off track. It's different. So my friend went to college and she had a hard time because she was like me. She was a serious academician. She wanted to learn. She had a career goal. And guess what? Most people in college, they favor the party times. They favor the relaxation. They favor the fun over academics. They spend too much time partying, not enough on academics. I spent too much time on academics, not enough going out and socializing, because you have to learn social skills, and I have none. To this day, if you knew how lonely I am, you'd know. I still have no social skills. My best friends are hundreds of miles away. Because I'm an idiot and I don't know how to be a friend, especially if I'm close. And I feel like crying even as I say this. But that's the way it was for me. My friend never had friends. She never made friends in college. And she struggled with this. And she worried that she would end up with a life like mine. And I told her not to worry, because once she graduates, once she gets a job, once she gets out there, she will meet like-minded people with similar interests in her career, the same kind of interest she has because of her career interests, and she'll meet a whole new group of people who all of a sudden, they're not out there partying. They have families, they're raising kids, they're married, and you're going to be part of that. And I'm happy to say that she is. She made those friends. I never could. I never did. One of the hardest things you are ever going to do, being smart, is being true to yourself. But I'm glad I did. Because when I go to sleep, I'm lonely, but I have no regrets. I lived the life I wanted to live. To this day, I don't do drugs. I don't drink alcohol. I've drank alcohol in the past. It's not like I've never tasted it. But I don't like the flavor. I certainly don't like the effects. And I've been told time and again, well, it's an acquired taste. And my question is always the same. If it's acquired, why should I want to acquire that taste? I don't get it. So now, I've lost so many of those common societal threads. I don't follow sports. I have nothing to contribute to a sports conversation. I don't drink or do drugs. When they start talking about their youth and how this one time they got wasted or did drugs or yada 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 and how reckless they were as a youth, sorry, that's not me. I'm not saying it's hopeless, because it's not. My friend, she found a great guy, and she's married, and she's now pregnant with her second child. She's built a wonderful life for herself. The few friends I had in high school were, well, the one friend. We're kind of the dregs of the high school. He was more athletic than I. He did run track. Best friend, he saved me. He was the reason I had a friend in high school. And we're still friends today. But he's smart. And he found a wonderful wife. He raised 2 kids. Now he's a grandfather. You can do it. You can do it. But don't be surprised if you struggle. Don't be surprised if it takes you longer to find your social path than it takes others. And if it does, don't run away from it. Don't run away from your friends. My friends are in South Dakota. Most of them. Now I have friends all over. I have friends all over. The area where I do have friends here, where I'm living now in Nebraska, they're not nearly as close to me as my friends were in South Dakota. We don't do things together like we did in South Dakota. I call them friends because they are friends. They're not as close. So what the hell am I doing in Nebraska? I don't know that I can answer that. And this is not therapy. I'm not here to unload my problems on you, but I am here to tell you that maybe there's an aspect of me that I'm a coward. Maybe I am. Maybe that's why I find myself so far away from the people who love me, from my family, not my immediate family. I've been so ostracized from my family, my blood relatives, that I don't even consider them family anymore. But family is not necessarily blood. Family are people that are honest with you, who are supportive, who have love. Not necessarily like husband-wife love, because I don't have a wife. But I have people who love me. And they're all just too damn far away. Show courage. Have the courage to accept your friends. Have the courage to be a friend. At the Same time, have the courage to stand apart and be you, be who you are. And if you're a parent of a smart boy, don't be surprised if their interests are different than yours. I have never been interested in sports. Like I say, my father never indoctrinated me, but I've never been interested in sports. And he tried. He did try throwing the football around with me. He did try taking me to a baseball game. When it never took off, he stopped trying. And he distanced himself. You know what? If you are the parent of a gifted child who is not interested in sports, find a way. Find a way. Take an interest in their interests. Now, if they're out playing Dungeons and Dragons, you don't have to play Dungeons and Dragons with them. But listen to them if they talk about it. They have friends that they're playing with, and sometimes they're going to have funny stories about what their character did. And it might just seem boring to you, but it is everything to them. Take them to science museums and science activities. If there's someone speaking in a public forum, take them. Take them. You may find it boring. They don't. Go to art museums. Introduce them to music. Take them to... I used to love classical music. Take them to see classical... There's free classical music, or cheap, shows all the time. Concerts. Let's call them concerts. Take them. They compromise. If you want to take them to a sporting event, they're going to go with you. They're not going to be interested. They're going to lose interest, but they'll go with you. Have this courtesy to do the same thing for them. Take them out to encourage their interest, to spark their passions, to stimulate their questions about the world. It's not all about you. If they have no interest in sports, don't take it personally, because they don't mean it personally. It's just the way it is. And you're going to find friends as you get older that you're just going to enjoy spending time with, and there are going to be some things that you're going to smile and bear as they start talking about how the Bengals are doing, because I'm from Cincinnati. This is the year the Bengals are going to take the World Series, by the way. That's one of my favorite jokes, and I wait for someone to say, "You mean the Super Bowl?" And I always respond, well, they have a better shot at winning the World Series than they do the Super Bowl. You can use that joke if you want. Most importantly, you're okay. You are okay. It's a struggle, but it's a gift to be different. It's a gift. People don't understand it, so they're going to give you a hard time about it. You're going to have a hard time finding friends. You're going to have a hard time being accepted. That's okay. That's not your problem. That's their problem, because if you become a medical doctor, who are they going to come to when they have a heart attack at 47, like I did? It's okay. Accept yourself. That's probably my biggest piece of advice. Accept yourself. You are okay. And if people start giving you a hard time, don't let them. My ex-wife used to love to fight. She would pick fights over some of the dumbest things. It got to the point where she would make a criticism of me. You always have to have a napkin on your lap. That was not one of them, but as an example. Suppose she said, "You always have to have a napkin on your lap, you're such a nerd." Instead of fighting with her, I got to the point where I would say, "You know what, you're right. I'm sorry, I'm wrong. I have no excuse. I'll try to do better. Man, that killed right there. It just killed the entire argument. She had nowhere to go with it. I just admitted I'm wrong. And she noticed this. She said, you're not going to get out of it this time by doing it. And I said, you're right, I do it every time, I'm sorry. And that was the end of that conversation. There's a wonderful movie, John Cusack, called Better Off Dead. And there is a scene where he and his friend was such a nerd. It's a comedy. The movie is a comedy. But he and his friend were talking at a dance. And the guy who stole John Cusack's girlfriend came up to both of them in this dance and said, oh, you make such a cute couple. Are you going to shave before you kiss her? And John Cusack's friend turned to him and just started laughing. Are you going to shave? And he just laughed. And he kept laughing and laughing until eventually the bully just turned around and left. He had nowhere else to go. Actually, throughout the dance, at least a couple more times, he would show up as he and his then girlfriend that he took away from John Cusack, as they were dancing, he would just show up right in between them. You need a shave. Laugh at yourself. And be okay. If someone doesn't like the way you look, doesn't like how smart you are, doesn't like the fact that you don't like sports, okay. I'm a chemist. I hate chemistry. Okay. I don't. It's okay. You're okay. Parents, they're okay. The world is full of love. But it gets hidden between so much hatred. We're Americans. There's more that brings us together than tears us apart, but we forget that, especially in this kind of a season. Because it seems like we're all so divided. We're not as divided as you might think. When you feel like there's no love in the world, there is. Think about the people who do love you. Forget about the people who are hating on you. Forget about them. Forget about the people who don't have faith in you. Think about the people who do. Think about the people who love you. And think about yourself. Think about how you have to accept yourself. If you change yourself to be popular, you are never going to be happy. You may get less ridicule, but you're never going to be happy. This girl I was tutoring, her father was trying desperately to get her to learn golf so she can get a full ride scholarship. And I told her, I have a good friend right now. Well, let's not say good friend. I have a friend who's attending University of Nebraska on a full ride academic scholarship. Her grades were good enough. Her ACT and SAT test scores were outstanding. Her interest is in a discipline where there's a strong need for more women. It's in a science. She's a chemical engineer major. She doesn't have a sports scholarship. She has an academic scholarship, and it's still full ride. Follow your passions. Be okay with being different, because that's what makes you who you are. And that's okay. You know what? That is great. Be yourself. Be yourself, because nobody else can be you better than you. There is nobody who is better at being who you are than you. And love that. I hope you found this helpful. Thank you very much for listening.